So welcome back everyone to the class on fifth module related to the force, torque and the pressure measurements. So in the last class, we were dealing related to what do you mean by pressure, its terminologies, the classification of pressure through which we can measure the static and dynamic characteristics of it. And again, the instruments which are being used to measure the pressure. So that also we dealt about. So then we were speaking about different measuring instruments, how the pressure could be evaluated, right? So in that aspect, we will proceed further. Everyone kindly write your name and USA number in the chat room. So I'll just share the screen, just a second. Yeah. So in the last class, I told you what all we've discussed related to pressure, the terminologies of its classification and the instruments, and which are the basic elastic members which are being used in measuring the pressure parameters. So which elastic members are more suitable. So we dealt about all the types of available pressure sensing elements and which are more suitable also we dealt about. So all these about Bourdon tube, diaphragms and bellow we had studied in transducer chapter itself. So these three are the mainly used pressure elastic members for the measurements. And we also dealt about the Bridgman gauge to measure the pressure or to evaluate it. And also we dealt about the McLeod gauge, right? So in our syllabus, we have one more gauge what we have to study with respect to the thermal conductivity aspects associated with the pressure parameters. So this is called as Pirani gauge. Okay, so you should understand what you mean by it. So this is the last type of gauge material. What you have to, this is the last type of the measuring instrument under your syllabus to measure or evaluate the pressure parameters. So this is associated with respect to the thermal conductivity aspects. So one thing you have to understand, so when you have a wire through which the electric current is flowing through it, the temperature associated with the wire in which there is a flow of current always varies with respect to the three parameters. The first one is what is the magnitude of the current which has been flowing through the given wire. So what about the resistivity factor of that particular wire? So again, the variation with respect to resistivity also takes place. Some wire might be having the least, some might be having the maximum resistivity for the flow of current. So again, depending upon the resistivity also, the temperature of the wire will be varied. And last part is the amount of heat dissipated from the wire during the flow of the current. So these are the three major issues which are directly related to the temperature of an given wire. And along with this, the amount of heat dissipation also depends upon the conductivity of the surrounding media. So how conductive the surrounding media is where the wire is being kept. So if it is of more conductivity around the surrounding media, then the heat dissipation will be obviously more. So you have to consider all these factors while evaluating the temperature of an given wire based with respect to the amount of current flowing on it. So that is the thing one you have to consider related to the thermal aspects. So again, it also depends upon the pressure, how the variation takes place. So that we'll now come to know. So as the pressure reduces, the thermal conductivity also reduces. And consequently, the filament temperature becomes higher for a given electrical energy input. So all the gauges here will be having an filament, so which will be heated. right? So if the pressure is down, the thermal conductivity goes down, but the temperature of the filament will be higher for an given electrical energy input. So it is based on the input of the electrical energy what you are providing to keep the filament at that particular temperature. But apart from that, the pressure will be reduced. As a result, even the thermal conductivity will also reduce. So on this basis of evaluation, two types of gauges are there in order to measure low pressures. Okay, so these gauges are associated to measure the pressure of the low value when it is associated with thermal conductivity, because we always consider that with the reduced pressure, the thermal conductivity also will be low. So the gauges we usually use, which is suitable to measure low pressure at thermal conductivity aspect. So based on this, we have two types of classification. One is Pirani thermal conductivity gauge and other one is the thermocouple vacuum gauge. So out of these two, you have in your syllabus the first one, Pirani thermal conductivity gauge. Okay, so this is how the schematic structure of an Pirani thermal conductivity gauge looks like. So you will be having an filament. So it is made up of platinum filament, which is a good conductor of the material, good conductivity, and this will be heated up. Okay, so this will be enclosed within an casing, so which is filled with gas. So again here the variation in the resistivity of the filament here for the flow of current again depends upon the amount of change you come across with respect to the pressure of the gas, so which is filled into this. So you'll be having a bulb like casing, so this filament will be housed within the bulb, and the variation in the pressure of the gas will help you to show what is the resistivity, what is the amount of heat dissipated, and also the flow of current through it. Okay, so here this is the structure how the Pirani gauge looks like. So it operates on the principle that if a heated wire is placed in a chamber of gas, the thermal conductivity of the gas depends upon the pressure. So that's what I told you. So the heated filament, here the filament material is platinum. So this heated filament will be housed within a bulb which is enclosed with the chamber of an gas. So the variation in the gas, the thermal conductivity varies depends upon the pressure of the gas which is being housed into it. And as a result, the transfer of the energy from the wire to the gas is proportional to the gas pressure. So the transfer of energy from the heated filament to the gas depends upon the change in the pressure of the gas. So both will be directly proportional. If the supply of heating energy to the filament is kept constant, so suppose you have heated this filament to a particular temperature and you maintain a consistent amount of heating to that particular filament, and only you keep on varying the pressure, right? So you will keep the filament temperature constant and only the pressure of the gas is varied. Then what happens? The temperature of the filament will alter and is therefore a method of pressure measurement. So you can vary and check what is the value of pressure at different temperature, because you're keeping the temperature of the filament constant and you're varying the amount of the pressure of the gas. So due to that, you will be having the variation in the temperature of the filament as well. In that way, you can measure the variation in the pressure using the Pirani gauge. So in that case, to measure the resistance of the filament wire, a resistance bridge circuit is used. Okay, so you will be having a resistance bridge circuit, which will be here. You will be having a bridge circuit, so which heats the filament, and this will be enclosed in an bulb casing, which has the gas here, so where the vacuum where the pressure of the gas could be varied. So to measure the resistance of the filament wire, always we use a resistance bridge circuit as shown in the diagram. The usual method is to balance the bridge at some datum pressure and use the out of balance currents at all other pressure. So what is the usual method is, first you will balance the bridge with respect to some specific datum pressure. So when you keep on sharing the pressure of the gas, you can optimize the value of the pressure of the gas to which there will be a consistent amount of temperature in the filament. Then you will balance that bridge circuit. So after balancing, then you use the other out of balance currents at all the other pressure values. So means at that time you can keep on varying the temperature with which the filament has been heated, and also vary the pressure of the gas which is passing through it. So you will get all the type of out of balance current values as an input and what pressure variations you are getting. So before having different temperature and different pressure values, once you have to balance the bridge circuit with an optimized pressure of the gas which is fed into the casing. So once the balancing of the bridge circuit is done, then you can keep on varying the amount of current which will be out of balance of the bridge circuit. So in that aspect, you will vary the pressure as well and find out the pressure variation with respect to the variation in the temperature also. So next you should understand how the factors of the pressure varies with respect to the ambient temperature changes. For that, you should be having one measuring gauge and one sealed and evacuated gauge. So how that works? So here, first you have to understand the heat loss from the filament is also a function of ambient temperature, and compensation for this effect may be achieved by connecting two gauges. So whenever a loss in the heat from the filament occurs, it is obviously understood that it is also a function of ambient temperature, and as a result, compensation for this effect has to be achieved by connecting two gauges in series. So you have to connect two gauges in series for the bridge circuit in order to overcome the factors of ambient temperature changes. And hence, in the circuit, you will be having two gauges. One is sealed and evacuated, and other one is the gauge which has to be measured. So we call one as a measuring gauge and the other one as the sealed and evacuated gauge. So first, the measuring gauge is first evacuated with respect to the required gas, and both the measuring and the sealed gauges are exposed to the same environmental conditions. So you can see you have two gauges here. One is the measuring one and other one is the evacuated gauge. Both the gauges are exposed to the same external environmental condition. Only thing, one gauge is sealed over here. So it is packed with amount of the gas with equal amount of pressure. So you cannot vary any pressure of the gas here because it is sealed. Only in the measuring gauge you will be able to vary the pressure across different temperatures in which the filament has been heated up. Okay. So after you bring these two gauges into the required bridge circuit and you expose them to the same environmental condition, the bridge circuit is adjusted through the resistor 2 to get a null condition. So you have the resistor 2 here, 1 and 3. So which are connected. So you will adjust the resistor 2 such that the entire bridge circuit is now balanced. If it has to be balanced, it has to show a value of 0. The null condition it has to show with respect to the two measuring gauges in which one is sealed and other one is open for the variation in the pressure. So until you will adjust the resistor 2 until you get the null condition. Then when the measuring gauge is exposed to the test vacuum pressure, the deflection of the bridge from the null position will be compensated for the changes in the environmental temperature. Initially, you will balance the bridge by seeing that the resistor, by varying the resistor R2, you will see that it has a null value. So afterwards, when you allow the variation in the pressure inside the chamber of the casing for the measuring gauge, so what happens, the null value will now show some variation due to change in the pressure. Okay. So the null position will be compensated for the change in the environmental temperatures. And also one thing you have to see, it must be noted that the heat loss from the filament is also a function of conduction loss to the filament supports and radiation loss to the surrounding. So whenever the heat loss, the filament will be heated to a particular temperature. When you keep on varying the pressure, the temperature of the filament also reduces, right? So there will be a loss of heat, dissipation of heat with respect to the external environment surrounding what is the temperature associated. So along with the loss of heat of the filament, it also results in the conduction loss and the radiation loss also with respect to the surroundings. So the time required for achieving thermal equilibrium may be of several minutes at low pressure. So when you have this much variation, again to get the thermal equilibrium, it will be at the low pressure value will take a certain period of time up till the several minutes, because it is associated not only with the heat loss along with the conduction loss as well as the radiation loss. So due to all these losses, to achieve thermal equilibrium, it will be taking some minutes at the low pressure. So remember, we are using this Pirani gauge measurements for low pressure evaluations. Okay, so this is about the Pirani gauge arrangement. So if they ask you to explain the Pirani gauge, you should first speak about what are the thermal conductivity factors, how it gets varied, on what basis the gauges which are available to measure the low pressures are classified. So after that, you will first explain how an Pirani gauge works with respect to its single diagram. So later, after explaining its process, then you should also say that the Pirani gauge is a function of ambient temperature also. In order to overcome the ambient temperature, you need two gauges. One is of sealed one and other one is the gauge which has to be measurable. So you will make an bridge circuit with respect to R1, R2 and R3. Okay, so by using R2, you will balance the bridge circuit until you get a null value. Then when the change in the pressure comes into picture with respect to the measuring gauge, the variation what you get will be displayed here in the indicator. So the variation in the temperature what you get is due to the variation of the pressure what you are putting forward. Okay, so this you have to explain it, and what are the factors associated with the heat losses and what time it takes again to come back to its thermal equilibrium. So this much concept you should explain related to Pirani gauges if it has been asked. So overall there are three gauges which are being used to measure our pressure measurements. So one is Pirani McLeod and the other one is the Bridgman gauge. So these are the three instruments which are being used to measure pressure by using the elastic members such as Bourdon tube, या diaphragms, या bellows. So next we should go, so this covers the second half of your fifth module. So the first section of the fifth module is completed. So the second section of the fifth module speaks about measurement of strain and temperature. So until now we studied the measurement of force, torque and pressure. Along with torque, we also associated with power because torque and power goes hand in hand. So how to measure force, torque, power and measurements we studied in the first half section of our module 5. So the second part of the module 5 will mainly deal with how to measure the strain, measurement of strain and temperatures. Okay, so in that the first part speaks about the strain measurements, and the last part of it will speak about the temperature measurements. And related to the strain measurements, we have just gone through already in brief related to our experiment strain gauges, how it works. In that related to strain gauge experiment, we also dealt about many key factors of the theory related to the strain measurements, its classification, everything in brief. So now we have to go step by step as per our syllabus in our module 5. So everyone knows what you mean by stress and strain. So whenever you have a force acting on a body, it obviously undergoes some deformation. Okay, so that is due to the stress induced in the system. So due to this deformation, always there will be some change in the length of the body. So the change in length to that of original length of a given body could be termed to be as an strain, right? So this is how you can define in the beginning what you mean by strain, and also you can just explore the mathematical equation for strain, which is dou L by L. So dou L is with nothing but the delta L is nothing but the change in length of the body to that of the original length of the body, right? So this is about what you mean by strain. So after that, also you should be knowing some terms related to our strain before going into strain measurements. So if a net change in the dimension is required, then the term total strain should be always used. So this particular strain, the change in length over the length, it provides the change in the deformation in a particular cross-section area. So if you need a net change in the dimension, then always you need to integrate all the change in length factors of all the cross-sectional areas together, which bounds to give you the total strain. So since the strain applied in many engineering materials are related to very small value, we usually refer the strain in terms of micro strain, right? The strain at various points might be different depending upon the strain gradient along the gauge length. You might be having a gauge length. At each location, the value of the strain might be different. It depends upon the gradient of the strain factor. So the average strain will be the point strain always at the middle point of the gauge length. So this you have to understand. You know what you mean by strain. So apart from strain, you should be knowing what you mean by total strain. So the total strain is the aggregation, the integration of all the strain which is acting at different locations. So when you consider to be as a net change, you have to consider all these factors and find out the total strain associated across a particular dimension of a body. So other thing, you should be knowing how it is expressed. It is expressed in terms of microstrain. So after this, you should be knowing how you will evaluate the strain, because the strain at every point will be different. So it depends upon the strain gradient factor across the gauge length. So if you want to find out the average strain, the average strain will be exactly at the center of the gauge length what you are using, irrespective of the length of the gauge you are using. Exactly at the center, you will get the average strain. So for the total strain, you should be taking the integration of all the strain values located at a particular dimension. So these parameters you should be knowing related to strain. So you know now what you mean by strain, and what you mean by total strain, and what you mean by average strain, right? So once you know the concepts related to the strain and its parameters, so now it is the time to understand the classification of the strain gauges. So since the change in the length over a small gauge is very small, a high magnification is very essential in order to measure the strain associated in a given body. And hence we need the strain gauges which has good magnification systems to evaluate even the small amount of deformations in a body. So based on that, we have three categories of the strain measuring instruments. So one is the mechanical strain gauge, the second is the optical strain gauge, and the third one is the electrical strain gauge. So first we need to speak about mechanical strain gauges. So as the name itself suggests, what do you understand from this? We are using strain gauges in order to magnify even the small deformation so that we can evaluate the amount of strain induced in the material due to application of any external load. And hence all the gauges what we use here will be having an high quality of magnification so that even it will be able to sense the small deformation and show the reading for the strain which is readable by the operator. Okay, so in that way, we need to start up with mechanical strain gauge. So this type of strain gauge usually involves only mechanical means for magnification purpose, right? So in that aspect, what does this mechanical strain gauge consist of? So it consists of an extensometer. Okay, if you want to see, so this is an overlook of how a mechanical strain gauge looks like. So you'll be having the specimen whose strain has to be determined, and this is a direction in which the load will be applied. So you will be having the mechanical strain gauge. So mechanical strain gauge will be having an extensometer. The extensometer will be having a magnifying lever which will magnify the deflection, the deformation, and that will be sensed by a dial indicator over here. For that purpose, we'll be having two gauges. So one will be fixed and the other one will be the movable. So this is how it looks like. And also there is a restriction about the length of the gauge, how much we can use into. So this is how then mechanical strain gauge looks like. Okay, so extensometer consists of a compound lever which is having high magnification. So this extensometer will be having a compound lever. So this is called as a magnifying lever, which helps in magnifying even the small deformations, and the variation or the deviation will be measured here from our dial indicator. So this is a simple mechanical strain gauge as shown to you in the figure. In this, it consists of two gauge points which will be seated on the specimen whose strain is to be measured. So this is a specimen whose strain is to be measured when it is subjected to the load. So due to subjection of the load, there will be deformation in the given specimen. So due to deformation, there will be change in the length with respect to the original length. So even a small deformation will be sensed by using these two gauge points. So one gauge will be clamped to the magnifying lever and the other one will be away from it. Anyhow, you will be having two gauges which could be movable on the given specimen. Okay, so one gauge will be fixed while the second gauge point is connected to the magnifying lever. So one gauge, so this gauge will be fixed and this will be connected to a magnifying lever. So the lever magnifies the displacement and it indicates directly on the calibrated dial indicator. Please remember, before you use the instrument, it has to be seen that it is calibrated periodically. It should be maintained well. Then only you'll get good, accurate and precise values for the measurements what you are doing. So even before starting, you should see that even the dial indicator has been calibrated well so that it could sense a proper displacement value and show the same recording in the indicator. So this displacement is later used to calculate the strain value. So this is the actual process which takes place in a mechanical strain gauge. In that, the most commonly used mechanical strain gauge is Berry type and Hagen-Berger type strain gauge. Okay, so if they ask you a Berry type of mechanical strain gauge also, you can just show and same simple diagram here. Okay, here what happens in Berry extensometer, the structural applications, it is mainly used for structural applications in civil engineering for long gauge length up to 200 mm. Okay, so you can just use for a gauge length of up to 200 mm, not more than that. So main application for it is been in the area of civil engineering for structural applications mainly. So this is then example for mechanical strain gauge where it has been used, and the most common type of mechanical strain gauge is Berry type 1. So how it works, what is its process, what is the simple sketch of it, all those things you should be aware enough related to our mechanical strain gauge. After this, even you should be knowing what are its advantages and disadvantages. So coming to the advantages part, it has a self-contained magnification system. So you don't need any extra accessories in order to magnify the deformation which is induced in the specimen due to applied load. Second one is no auxiliary equipment is needed, as in the case of electrical strain gauges. So sometimes what happens, we have the other classification of strain gauges, which is into the sector of electrical one. So electrical strain gauges usually need an auxiliary system in order to run the device, but in this case it is not needed because it is self driven, right, and it has a magnification system embedded in it, so no extra auxiliary equipment is needed as in case of electrical strain gauges. So these are the two plus points when you go up with a mechanical strain gauge, but along with it you have some restricted factors also associated with as disadvantages. So what are those? These mechanical strain gauges are limited only to measure static characteristics. We have studied what are the static characteristics and the dynamic characteristics also during the time of the studying the first part of the measurements, right? So all these type of mechanical strain gauges could be used only to measure the static parameters, means which doesn't change with respect to time. Dynamic measurements always vary with respect to time, so those kind of measurements could not be achieved by using mechanical strain gauges. It is limited only to static test. Second one is eye inertia of the gauge makes it unsuitable for dynamic measurements. So since it can keep without changing for a longer period of time, then you can term that it has high inertia effect. So due to high inertia factor of the gauges, we cannot use this mechanical strain gauges for dynamic measurements and varying strain. So this is the reason why it is restricted for only the static test. And the third disadvantage is the response of the system is very slow. And as a result, there is no method of recording the readings automatically. Since the response of the system is slow, you cannot have any device or any accessory which could record the readings automatically and display in the form of digital one. Okay, so you can just read, you cannot record. So I told you the measuring devices will be of three categories. One which can store in the sense one which can record, one it can just help you to read the data, and the third one is which can help in transmitting the output to some other device where it has been needed. So we have three categories of the output. So out of these three, this mechanical strain gauge is only feasible to see the reading directly using a dial indicator. It cannot be recorded and sensed automatically what is the output is. So this is one of the disadvantage. And the last part is there should be sufficient area on the test specimen and clearance above it in order to accommodate the gauge together with its mounting. So it requires an amount of specified surface area for which the test specimen has to be placed, and it should also have an clearance above it so that it can accommodate the gauge together, because you should be having a sufficient space where you will lie at the given specimen, and you should be having a good clearance in and around so that you can assign or fix the gauge properly along with this entire unit. So you should be having a good sufficient area such that it works feasibly without any disturbance from the external surroundings. Anyhow, this is not a major drawback that could be cleared enough. But these three are thinkable factors which has to be overcome, but which is not possible. And hence, these are the plus and the negative points when we use up a mechanical strain gauge. Yeah. So next one is our optical strain gauge. So these are the three classifications. So we covered the first one in the strain measurement, which is the mechanical strain gauge. The second one is the optical strain gauge, and third one is the electrical strain gauge. In electrical strain gauge, we have some classifications and the theory of electrical strain gauge as per your syllabus, what we have to deal about. But under mechanical and optical, you have to just know what is it, how it is operated, what are its advantages and disadvantages. So we covered up with mechanical. Then we are now going for optical strain gauges. So the most commonly used optical strain gauge was developed by Tuckerman, and hence the name it is called as Tuckerman optical extensometer. So it is named behind the person who invented it. So what does this optical strain gauge consist of? It is a combination of both mechanical and optical system. Why? It is using an extensometer and an optical meter. So what does an extensometer does? It helps in measuring the deformation of a material when it is subjected to an external load. So that deformation which is being deformed is being sensed by a mechanical part of the gauge, and later it is with a combination of an optical system. Why? Because here we are using an autocollimator, and hence we can say optical strain gauge is a combination of both mechanical and optical system, since it is using an extensometer and an autocollimator. So this is the autocollimator which always helps in sending two parallel rays of lines due to the use of objective lines here, and along with that you will be having an extensometer. So this extensometer helps in measuring the deflection or the deformation induced in the specimen due to subjection of the load. So based on the load, the deformation will be there in the specimen, and that deformation will be measured by the extensometer. Later it will be transmitted to the this one autocollimator, and hence it is a combination of mechanical and optical system. So the nominal length of the gauge is the distance between from a knife edge to the point of contact of lozenge. Lozenge is nothing but it works like a mirror. So the nominal length for measuring is restricted between the knife edge to the point of contact of lozenge. So this is the knife edge. So main measuring distance is from the knife edge, from this distance to that of the lozenge. So lozenge works exactly like a mirror. So this will be considered as our measuring length. Okay, so this will be our L. So what is this lozenge? So lozenge exactly acts like a mirror. So distance between the knife edge and the lozenge changes due to the loading. So based on the loading effect, the distance between the knife edge and the lozenge, it will be keeping on varying. So the lozenge rotates, and if any light beam is falling on it, it will be deflected. Okay, so what happens is you will be having the specimen, it will be subjected to the load. Due to the load, you will be having the deflection. And if any rays of light will fall on this lozenge, it gets deflected, it gets rotated. Okay, so lozenge rotates if any light beam is falling on it. If it is falling, it will be deflected. So when it is being deflected, so it gets deflected only when the load is subjected, there is a deformation. Due to the deformation, the lozenge rotates. So when it rotates, the rays which is passing through will be deflected on the lozenge. So this acts exactly like a mirror, because you'll be having a prism here. So the rays of light coming through the prism will be passed through the lozenge. So this works exactly like a mirror. So it helps in deflecting the rays of the light when it rotates due to the deformation induced in the specimen due to subjected load. So that you have to understand. So later now the function of an audio and the deflection which has been induced will be measured by the extensometer, which is connected at the top surface of the lozenge. So you can see. So when it rotates, the deformation will be measured by using our extensometer. So this deflection will be then transmitted to our autocollimator. So the function of autocollimator, you know very well, we have studied this already, is to send parallel rays of light and receive back the reflected light beam from lozenge on the optical system. The function is to, so you have two functions. One is to deflect the rays of the light from the lozenge, and other one is to send the parallel rays of light to the eyepiece. Okay, so this is the two functions of the autocollimator. So one is to send parallel rays of light, and other one is to receive back the reflected beam of light from the lozenge. So the reflected beam of light is received by the lozenge only when the deformation comes into picture, or else it won't be received. And to receive the reflected rays back, you should be having a prism. So this helps in transmitting the reflected rays back to the autocollimator. Another two factors what you have to understand is this gauge can be used for dynamic measurements. The other type of the mechanical strain gauge cannot be used for dynamic measurements, but this gauge can be used for dynamic measurements up to 40 hertz. And that could be done only by using an photographic recorder. So here strains as small as 2 micrometer per meter can be resolved. So along with this, what is the restriction in the gauge length? Here the gauge length is nothing but the distance from the lozenge to that of the knife edge. So this gauge length could be varied from 6 mm to 250 mm. So this is the lower limit of the gauge length and this is the upper limit. So these are the range within which you can fix the gauge length for measuring the strain in the specimen when the load is been induced. So due to the deformation, the lozenge rotates and this deflection is being transmitted to the prism. From that it is measured to the extensometer. Once the deformation is measured, the reflected rays are absorbed by the autocollimator, and this helps in transmitting the parallel rays of light through which it could be visualized through the eyepiece. So you will be having a proper lightning source in the lamp which helps in visualizing the rays of light properly. Okay, so this is how an Tuckerman optical extensometer works, and this is more suitable for dynamic measurements, and it has some constraints. It could be measured until 40 hertz, and the gauge length requirement can vary only from 6 mm to 250 mm. So this is about how an Tuckerman optical extensometer works about. But along with this, you should also be knowing what are its advantages and disadvantages. Coming to the advantages, the position of the autocollimator need not be fixed relatively to the extensometer. So you have an extensometer. It is not like you have to fix with many constraints that it has to be located in this position only. So it is not like that. It could be fixed relatively to the extensometer. The position of the autocollimator need not be fixed or relative to extensometer, so it has flexibility. And second one is reading can be taken by holding the autocollimator even in hand. It is not necessary that it has to be fixed with respect to the extensometer where you have aligned. By keeping in hand also you can measure the reading. The disadvantages are this is limited for dynamic measurements. Large gauge lengths are required and it cannot be used where large strain gradients are encountered. So what are its disadvantages are it is limited for dynamic measurements, not static. And second one is you require large gauge lengths for the measurements. And third one is it cannot be used where large strain gradients are encountered. It could be used only to sense a small variations in the strain, not a large strain gradient. And secondly, the gauge lengths. It requires a large amount of gauge length, and these are highly suitable for measuring the dynamic characteristics of an specimen when subjected to the load. So these are the disadvantages and the advantages associated with optical strain measurements, optical strain gauge. Okay. So now we dealt with about two types of classification of the strain gauges. One is a mechanical strain gauge, and then we understood what are its advantages and disadvantages. Later we came for optical strain gauge, right? And which is the most common optical strain gauge is Tuckerman optical extensometer. So we studied how does it operates, what are its advantages and disadvantages. After this, you should be knowing exactly what do you mean by electrical strain gauges. So this is the last type of classification of strain gauge measuring instruments. Right, in electrical strain gauge, you have in your syllabus the classifications, the theory of the strain gauge, and the types of the strain gauges. So this is just information related to electrical strain gauge. So in electrical strain gauge, the change in strain produces change in some electrical characteristics also. So when there is a deformation, there will be obviously change in the strength. So due to the deformation, there will be change in the cross-sectional area, and also all the functional characteristics associated electrically will also be embedding you various changes. So the electrical output can be magnified by using some electronic equipments only. So what are the changes which are coming into picture due to variation in the strain? So that could be studied, and these output could be magnified by using only electronic equipments. So in that case, the electrical methods of strain measuring are very highly sensitive, and it possesses ability to respond to dynamic strains. So these strain gauges are also abide to measure the dynamic characteristics of a specimen when subjected to an external load. And hence, this is very much suitable for dynamic strain measurements. So in this aspects, we can see that the electrical strain gauges are classified into 4 types. So one is the capacitance gauges, inductance gauges, piezoelectric gauges, and resistance gauges. So in these classifications, if you're using an capacitance to form a gauge, then it is called as an capacitance gauge. If you're using an inductance type of gauge, it is called as an inductance. If you're using an piezoelectric gauge, piezoelectric material to create a gauge, then it is called as an piezoelectric gauge. Okay, so there is no much description needed for y'all as per the syllabus related to the classification. You should be focusing more on the types of the strain gauges. So this is about what you mean by electrical strain gauge and its classifications. Okay, so now you should be knowing what you mean by electrical resistance strain gauge in depth little bit. So you know that when you hear the word electrical resistance strain gauge, one can assure that it is the most commonly used method for measuring the strain measurements. And you have to understand it works on what principle. It operates on the principle that the electrical resistance of a conductor changes only when it is subjected to an mechanical deformation. So this is the basic funda or the principle on which the electrical resistance strain gauge works. So whenever the electrical strain resistance of a conductor always change whenever it is subjected to some mechanical deformation, then only the strain comes into the picture. That everyone knows it. So the electrical conductor will be bonded to the specimen with an insulating cement under no load condition. So this you should be knowing. So what does it mean? So here the electrical conductor will be always bounded to the specimen to which the resistance has to be measured. How it will be bonded? It will be bonded with the help of an insulating cement, it is called. Okay, under which condition? Under no load condition. Always all the measuring specimen what we studied until now were subjected to some loading condition. So due to the induced load, what is the deformation? We used to measure either by using mechanical strain gauges or through the optical strain gauges. But here, the electrical conductor will be bounded to the specimen by using an insulating cement, but this will not be subjected to any loading condition. It will be under no load conditions only, so that you should be aware. And later the load will be applied and it will produce a deformation, but in the beginning the specimen will not be embedded with any loading condition. Okay, so later it will produce a deformation in both the specimen and the resisting element. Okay, in that case the deformation is indicated by the change in resistance of an element. So how it is being followed, everyone knows the equation resistance is equal to rho L by A. So where rho will be nothing but the resistivity of the conductor material what you are using. So this keeps on varying depending upon which type of resistive material is being used. So it won't remain the same for each type of the conductor material you are using. And L will be the length of the electrical conductor, and A will be the cross-sectional area of the conductor at which it is being subjected to measure the strain. So this is the basic thing what you have to understand about the electrical resistance strain gauge. So based on that, you should be knowing some part of its classification, and in depth we will go in tomorrow's class. So here what happens basically, if the conductor is stretched, the length L will increase, the cross-sectional area will decrease, and the resistance will increase. So this is a thing what you have to keep in mind. So if by chance the conductor is being stretched, always the length will increase. Due to the increase in the length, the cross-sectional area will decrease, and due to the decrease in the cross-sectional area, there will be a chance for increase in the resistance. And similarly, the reverse. When the conductor is compressed, the resistance will obviously decrease. So these two variations one should be aware of. When the resistance increases and when the resistance decreases. If it is told the resistance is decreasing, then it means to say that the conductor material is been compressed. Whenever it is told the resistance is increasing, then it is mean to say that the conductor material what you are using is being stretched. Okay, so due to stretching, the length will increase and the cross-sectional area will decrease, and due to compression the length will decrease, right? So these are the two parameters what you have to understand with respect to increase in the resistance and decrease in the resistance. So here, based on this, the electrical resistance strain gauges are classified as follows. So you have three. One is the unbonded type strain gauge, bonded type strain gauge, and semiconductor or piezoresistive strain gauges. So these are the classifications. So under bonded type strain, so under bonded type strain gauge, we have two methods. One is the wire type and other one is the foil type. So the foil type is more good and consistent enough in measuring the strain than that of a wire method. So all these type of strain gauges we will study in tomorrow's class. So currently I will be stopping at here. So if you have any doubts, you can kindly let me know. And in the chat room, if you haven't written your name and USN number, kindly add on. And if you have any doubts, you are kindly free to speak. And I just wanted to speak few things. So we had a meeting yesterday that we will be having our second internals and third internals within this month, and everything has to be completed, your lab internals also, by May 31st as per the notification of VTU. So with respect to that, we'll be having two internals. The second internals will be mostly on 17, 18, 19. The exact dates I will just post you later. Okay, so for that you will be having 1.5 chapters, and again for the last test you'll be having the remaining 1.5 chapters. So for the second internals we'll be having objective types of MCQs, whereas the third internals will be based on descriptive one, right? So I will be giving you the exact details related to that. Don't waste your time, keep studying. Okay, so it will be very difficult at the end if you won't prepare, and at the end moment preparation will not fetch you more marks. And even I told you in the beginning, please complete your records. If you haven't written the records, please see that I have evaluated around 8 experiments until which the college was on. So after that, the practicals which are being taken by myself, by Nitya Purnima ma'am and Sunresh sir. So you see that all the experiments are written in your lab records. And please draw the table, everything. Only the graph will be pending, and we will be and we have taking the video recordings with respect to our equipments in the laboratory. I have covered already 3. So all those video recordings will be uploaded in the YouTube channel with respect to the readings also. So you can then use those reading values, you can draw the graph and complete it. It has to be completed without fail 100%, okay, because you need to submit that also. If you don't do all this groundwork right from the beginning, at the end of May 31st, it will be very difficult for you to manage everything. So see that you keep all the things updated with respect to your laboratory records, and also keep on preparing for your module 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So all course material you have with you, the PPTs you have, the video links you have, assignment questions you have. Okay, so please do the actual groundwork. You have 24/7 time with you all. After the regular classes, after 4:30, you will be having full time. Please use it effectively so that you will excel with good marks, even with respect to the bad situation related with corona. Okay, if you are any doubts currently, you can ask me right away. Jayant?
No, ma'am, no doubt.
Okay, no, please keep on reading. Okay, see, I am worried about the records. How many of you have written the records? No one, is it?
Writing, ma'am.
Ma'am, since I'm a native, so I'm not able to get A4 sheets as of now. So that's why what should be done. I'm having an issue regarding that.
No, for the records, you don't have your lab records with you all?
No, ma'am. Actually, I'm myself not having the record. So
Okay. If
and
you
also the stationaries and all. No, nothing is open. Agra is in red.
Tarun, no, Tarun, even if it is in red zone, so now at least the minimum requirements are being opened. So at least you try to get the stationaries. Where is your record exactly? Is it at the hostel here somewhere, or
Yes, flat in Bangalore. On.
in Bangalore only? At
We
least you
haven't
can.
carried our records to our native zone. That's why.
Okay, no one is having the records with you all.
Yes, ma'am.
In that case, in the worst case, you can at least try to get A4 sheets. Hello?
Actually, they are not even allowing everyone to get minimum food requirements also. Ma'am. There's been a
Okay.
critical situation over here. That's why I have to address that.
Mm.
I've been to the mart 2 days back only, ma'am.
Okay. No, here in Bangalore also the same case, but still they have opened all the minimum requirements which are needed. And currently from yesterday we are coming to the college as well. Okay, so let me see. In that case, I will just speak to the HOD and I will let you know back what could be done with respect to the lab records. But the dates are finalized for your second and the third internals. Please prepare well. Okay, so you will be getting different questions for each student. It will be shuffled. It will not be the same set of questions. So there'll be a set of 60 questions which will be jumbled, and it will be thrown to the students, a list of 30 questions, and you'll be having only 30 minutes in which you have to answer. So you will be not having a relaxation time of 1 hour for 30 minutes in second internals. So please be ready, get prepared, and the last test will be a descriptive one. So where you have to answer 5 questions. Okay, so we'll provide 10 questions. So again, it will be shuffled and thrown for each student's 5 questions each. So you should be writing it. So you will be writing in a sheet of paper. So after writing in a sheet of paper, you will be giving 1 hour exactly. You will be writing for 5 full questions. Then a 15 minutes time will be given for you to scan those and upload back to the Google Classroom. Okay, so as you are uploading the assignments, you will write the test in the sheet and you will scan and upload it within that given 15 minutes. If that 15 minutes is crossed for you all to upload the answer papers, then that will not be considered for evaluation. So see that you will upload it within the given scheduled time to the Google Classroom. But the questions you will get in the Moodle platform. So you will see the questions in the Moodle platform as you did for the first internals, but you will write it in the sheet of paper. So this is a descriptive one which will take place in the third internals, that will be at the end of this month. The second internals will be around 17, 18, 19, yeah, 18, 19, 20, whatever. I don't have those dates in my book currently. I kept it at home. I will post you the dates and even you will be getting the timetable, everything as per scheduled as you got for the first internals. So don't worry, only from your end you see that you prepare well. Okay.
And syllabus for the next internal?
Yes, the syllabus, it is told we have to give 1.5 chapter for the second internals and the remaining 1.5 for the third. So we have covered until now the first 2 modules. So for the portion for the second internals will be third full module and fourth half. So it will come for 1.5, and remaining half portion of the fourth module and the fifth module will be for the last internals, which will be a descriptive one. And in that, if I want to add on any numericals related to the shaft gauge design, I will let you know if any numerical is to be needed. Okay. Because you haven't solved any numerical, it was just objective type, it will not fetch you more helpful in the time of examination. So I'm just thinking if I want to add on any numerical, so only the numerical of the first part, this one, the second module will be considered. But I will tell you at the end of third internals. For currently for second internals, the third full module and half of the fourth module. Until where it is, I will post you exactly along with the date when it will be going on. Okay. But at least, yeah. Hello?
Dates for the second internal. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Dates
Karthik.
for the second internals, ma'am.
Yeah, date I have written in my book. It is at my home. Yesterday we had a meeting. So I think it is 18, 19, 20th, hopefully. 18, 19 and 20 for 3 days. And the last internals is on 29, 30 and 31. Roughly it is. Exactly I'll see the dates in my book and I will post after I go home.
Okay.
Yeah. So please use the time usefully, study well, be safe, take care and aim high. That's it I want to tell you. Okay. If anyone still have not written your name and USN, please type it out.
Ma'am, how is the lab internals going to be conducted?
Yeah, and even, sorry, I forgot, even the lab internals will be conducted. So we have to conduct hopefully 1 lab internals at least minimum. So we are thinking how best it could be done. We have one more meeting related to lab internals also. That is also mandatory part which has to be completed within May 31st. So only I'm worried your records have to be completed. We have to assign the marks for the records also. And you people are saying you don't have your records with you all. At least those who have records. How many of you have records? No one? Anyone at least in the class who have records?
A few might.
Okay, those who have few, at least try to complete in the records. And for others, what best could be done, we will decide and let you know within today or tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, we have shared the VTU, this one lab manual also to you all, and you have all the online labs which were done with respect to PPTs by myself, by Nitya ma'am and by Sundaresh sir also. And we'll be sending you the video recordings with respect to demonstration of the remaining equipments, which was not done to you all in the college in physical. So even that will be uploaded shortly. So you please take the reference of all and kindly to manage to complete your records. So I'll tell you what to do for the students. Those who don't have the records, just give me a day. I will update you at least by tomorrow. But please prepare well for all the subjects for your second and third internals. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. Bye, Jayan. Good day.